Hi, I'm Neil Beck. I was a doctor in Perth, Western Australia for 53 years, first working in the hospital, then for many years as a family suburban doctor. And in the early days, because we didn't have a medical school in Perth, there was a shortage of doctors and a shortage of specialists, so family doctors were very busy, and we did a lot of stuff that we don't do now. Helped 800 babies to come into the world, did a lot of appendectomies and tonsillectomies and vasectomies and broken bones and trauma, stuff like that, and had to help a lot of people with mental health problems because there were very few psychologists and psychiatrists, and most people couldn't afford them. So what I want to talk to you about first tonight is the blind areas in mental health and addiction. What I found was, from my 500,000 consultations, home and hospital visits, and looking at people's lives, what I found in the end was that the most important thing in life is mental health. The people with the best lives, which we didn't see very often, were mentally healthy. The people with mental health problems had the worst lives, and especially if they became addicts, because I discovered that addiction is really end stage or late stage mental health. When I first started, I didn't know much about addiction. We'd always had alcohol and tobacco, but not much else. But then Western Australia, or Perth, which is one of the most remote cities in the world, gradually got connected with lots of flights, and we got all sorts of stuff coming into Perth. In the late 1990s, we had a terrible epidemic of heroin addiction, and people were dying everywhere from overdoses. Young people would tell me that they were the last person left of their group of friends. All the others had OD'd on heroin. So I thought I'd better get to know a bit about heroin, and I started to work in an addiction clinic 10 hours a week. And of course I wanted to know what caused addiction. In health, you always want to know the cause. If you know the cause, it's much easier to help people, and when they get better they don't relapse. If you don't know the cause, it's very hard to help them, and if they get better but the cause is still there, they're probably going to relapse. But I couldn't find anyone who could tell me what caused addiction. I went to all the addiction clinics in Perth and Sydney and couldn't find anyone who could tell me what caused addiction, or even seemed to think it was important to know what caused addiction. But of course it was very important to know what caused addiction. And then one day, in the clinic where I was working, the addiction clinic I was working 10 hours a week, I saw 15 heroin addicts, and 5 of them had attention deficit disorder. And they'd had attention deficit disorder since early childhood, and they'd had rough lives. They were disturbed kids at home in the early days. Most, or about half of them, had a parent with ADD, which made things difficult. And when they got to school, they were a problem in the classroom, and they copped a lot of flack and caused a lot of disturbance in the classroom, and they didn't get a good education, and they often left school early, and then they didn't get good employment. Big problem. And so many of them did not get diagnosed and treated for their heroin addiction, so they ended up getting treatment on the streets, and everything on the streets was addictive. The nature of addictive chemicals, whether they're medicines or street chemicals, is that at first a small amount, which doesn't cost very much, gives a lot of relief to people who are very distressed by a mental health disorder. But then these addictive substances never cure anything, so the problem is still there. So the next day they're suffering again with their mental health problem, and they need another lot of the addictive substance, but their chemistry develops a tolerance or a resistance to the addictive substance, which means that it's not quite as effective, so they have to take a little bit bigger amount, and when they take a bigger amount, their chemistry develops a greater tolerance or resistance. So to get the same relief, they have to keep on taking more and more and more, because their chemistry is getting more and more resistant or tolerant to the addictive substance, and they end up that they need a large amount of the addictive substance to get relief from their mental health suffering, and that large amount develops a high resistance or tolerance to the addictive drug in their chemistry. Their chemistry becomes very twisted or distorted to cope with the presence of all that addictive substance, which is an unnatural chemical. And when that happens, their chemistry is very distorted and very tolerant or resistant to the addictive substance. They have to take a lot of addictive substance, and then if they try to stop the addictive substance, their very distorted chemistry reacts badly. It's adapted to having the addictive chemical, and the person craves badly for the addictive substance because their chemistry has been so changed. So then they've got a terrible problem. They want to keep taking the addictive substance because it gives them relief from their suffering, but it doesn't give them very much relief now because of the tolerance. But they can't stop the addictive substance because they get craving and withdrawals. A terrible situation. So the people who suffered the most were the people with fairly severe or severe mental health distresses, and who had ended up, because they didn't get effective diagnosis and treatment with medicines, they ended up taking street treatment, and the street treatment was addictive. So then I looked very carefully at every new patient, every new addict who came, and I found that 95% of them, 19 out of 20, had a mental health disorder, usually 2 or 3 mental health disorders, which had driven them to street treatment, which had made them an addict. And what were the mental health problems? The mental health problems, the commonest was worry, anxiety problems, general anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, all sorts of phobias or fears. And another common thing was sleep problems. A lot of people who became addicts had been very poor sleepers, and they'd had taken medicines to help them sleep, and almost all medicines for sleep and anxiety are addictive. All the barbiturates, all the benzodiazepines, Ambien, Stilnox, all addictive. The next major mental health problem was depression, and depression was pretty common. And then there was bipolar disorder, which is sometimes being very manic, racing, and sometimes swinging back to being very depressed. Then there was attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADD, ADHD, and then there was what I call IAD, irritability anger disorder, a lot of angry people, a lot of domestic violence. One woman killed every 4 days in Australia by her partner or ex-partner. And then there was post-traumatic stress disorder, which was a terrible body reaction with all sorts of stresses and strains in the body, and shaking and sweating and nausea and sometimes vomiting or diarrhea, and terrible fear. And some people who had this got it repeatedly. It kept on coming back. They just didn't feel bad. They also had all these bodily disturbances, and that was called post-traumatic stress disorder. And then there was one that I call post-traumatic evil focus, which is people who have something very big and bad happen to them and they can't cope with it, so they focus on other people's problems in faraway places, like Guantanamo Bay or the CIA, or terrible things that are happening to women and children in some faraway place, which didn't seem to have a name, so I called it PTEF, post-traumatic evil focus. And then there were people with very low self-esteem. Some people had been born and grown up in very poor circumstances, and they had very low self-esteem. And then there was schizophrenia, and then there was autism. That was about it, about 10 common things. And most people who'd progressed to addiction had 2 or 3, and I still remember one woman who had 5 of those major problems. We tended to think, or people in general and doctors as well, tended to think people only had one mental illness, because with physical illnesses our body is big, and if we've got something wrong with one part of it, there's probably nothing wrong with the other parts. But your brain is not very big, and if one part of your brain not working properly, the part next door is also not working very well, and so you tend to get 2, 3 or 4 things. You start with ADD, ADHD, and then you get post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety disorders and major depression. You start off with anxiety, and you then can't sleep, and you then get depressed, and you then have loss of self-esteem. So these things tend to snowball. So what I found was that the most important thing in life, in having a good life, was to be mentally healthy, to have mostly normal feelings, normal thoughts, normal habits. And the next most important thing was to have enough good relationships. People need people. Loneliness is now proven to be as dangerous as 15 cigarettes a day. But unfortunately, a lot of people had bad relationships. The bad relationships were sometimes due to people being poor quality. They were not honest, they were not fair, they were not decent, they were selfish, mean, dishonest. Or they were incompatible, because compatibility is so important. If a couple marries and they're pretty compatible, they just grow closer and closer and closer and live happily forever. If they're incompatible, the two different, they just grow further and further apart. Because for 98% of human history, humans lived in small groups in nature where they knew everyone very well. The group had to have at least 30 people to protect one another from the wild animals when they were living in nature. And there couldn't be more than 150 in the group because there had to be enough food within walking distance. There were no gardens, no farms, no factories. Nature provided the food, and there had to be enough within walking distance because they had to walk out and find it and get back home before it got dark, because they didn't have any electric lights or torches or anything. So people lived in these groups for the whole of their life, of 30 to 150 people, and they lived very close. There were no brick walls. They were just huts. I remember when I was a young guy going to the medical school in Adelaide, driving over the Nullarbor Plain, out in the middle of the Nullarbor Plain, coming across this colony of Aboriginal people, and they were all talking, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I could see that they lived in these little bark huts, and no brick walls. Everybody knew everybody and what was going on, and they were compatible because they lived together and they knew everyone. But now your next door neighbour could have been born on the other side of the world. They could have a completely different culture, religion, other things, but we see them and we like their looks, and so we marry them, and it's a fizzer. It doesn't work. Even when I was a boy, which is a long time ago, in the country town where I grew up on a farm, but I went to school in the country town, and there were about 6,000 people in that town, but most people knew everyone else. If you knew their father or their mother or their brother or their sister or you knew their reputation, you knew them. And the culture was pretty much all the same, and some families were new, but a lot of families had been on their farm for 3 generations. One of my cousins, born the same year as me, was married a girl, and they'd been in the same class in school from the age of about 10, and they both came from farms a few miles apart. Compatibility. Yeah, so mental health, number one, good relationships, number two, uh, enough good relationships, because people need people, because that's how humans are. That's how they've been for hundreds and thousands of years. They didn't live alone, they lived in groups. And the next most important thing is to have strong, happy chemistry. In our brain mostly, we've got about 25 chemicals that make us feel good. Over 20 endorphins. Endorphins are endogenous morphines. Yes, we produce morphine type chemicals internally that stop pain and distress. And there's a bit over 20 endorphins, and then there's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and noradrenaline, about 25. And if you live a good life with physical activity, good food, good relationships, your happy chemistry is strong. And that's very important, because the fourth thing is to have a strong anti-disease system. It's called the immune system, and the immune system is white cells and antibodies and chemicals in every part of us that fight infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. And you want that to be strong. And that is pretty heavily dependent on your happy chemistry, your endorphins. If your happy chemistry is high, that helps to keep your immune system high, which helps to stop you from getting sick, which makes your life better, and it's just a good cycle rather than a bad cycle. If your happy chemistry is low because you're living an unhealthy life, and you've had a lot of troubles and a lot of stress, and you get depressed, you get unhappiness and depressed immune system, and then you get sick. A lot of nearly every family has problems that have passed down the generation. It's called transgenerational trauma, and in my family the transgenerational trauma started with my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother, one of them, Christina, had 9 children, starting when she was 16. First one when she was 16, when she was 30, 2 babies 10 months apart, and then the last one. And there were 3 different fathers to all those children, and then she got cancer and died when she was 42, which was a disaster for all those children, but a disaster for her. And that would have been because her immune system was low, because her endorphins were low, because she'd had so much stress and strain. Can you imagine how much sleep deprivation and anxiety and worry? At least one of her sons and one of her daughters died in childhood. Tough times. So, yeah. Now, so that's mental health, enough good relationships, enough happy chemistry, a strong immune system, and then the habit of smiling. We don't realise, never got taught in medical school, never realised it for a long time, that happiness is so important. Happiness goes with healthiness, healthiness goes with happiness. And we knew that when our happy chemicals were high, we smiled and laughed and were happy. But we didn't know until science discovered more recently that when we smile or laugh, that actually causes our brain and organs to produce even more happy chemistry. So smiling produces more happy chemistry, and that usually makes the people you're with smile, and then they're happier and everything goes well. So the habit of smiling as often as you can is very important. And the sixth thing to have a good life is no addictions. Addictions are such a disaster, and they are late stage mental health disorders. And the seventh thing is transgenerational trauma. So much mental ill health is due to problems that occurred in previous generations that affected people's happiness and affected their parenting and often caused poverty because they didn't have very good jobs, didn't earn enough money, and often caused divorces and marriage breakdowns or unhappy marriages where the children were traumatized, and that resulted in mental health disorders. So it's very important to know that anything that really nasty that happened in your mother and father, especially your mother, and their mothers and fathers, and their mothers and fathers' mothers and fathers, 3 generations, you need to know. And often people don't talk about the bad things, don't talk about the child who died when they were 3, don't talk about the man who was killed in an industrial accident because he was drunk, don't talk about the woman who died giving birth. A lot of people think that you shouldn't talk about bad things happening. Well, you shouldn't talk about them too much, but you should know about them because you need to know their consequences. A lot of people who are very depressed or very anxious and don't know why, it's because of transgenerational trauma. It's because, for instance, I can just quickly, just in the people that are close to me, rattle off mother who died of tuberculosis when her son was 3. A mother who died of cancer when she was 36, died when she was 46. Must have had very low immune system caused by stress. My great-grandmother, who had 9 children, 2 of whom died, 2 husbands and 1 boyfriend. The first husband was an alcoholic who left her when she had 4 babies. The first one at 16, and at 22 when he left, she had 4. I don't know how long she had 4 because one of them died. But then she had a daughter by someone she wasn't married to, and then another daughter who died young, and then she married again and had 3 more, and then died of cancer when she was 42. There are people who've committed crimes, people who've been gamblers and lost the family home, people who've crashed the car, and we tend not to talk about these things, and we shouldn't talk about them too much, but we should know about them because we should know what caused them. Why did Uncle John's wife get killed in when a car she was travelling in crashed? Because the driver was reckless and driving too fast. So we need to know that these 5 children lost their mother in a car accident, and one of them became schizophrenic, and we need to know what happened and why, just so we can cope, we can manage the consequences. So I want to talk about one of the reasons why so many people end up addicts, because they didn't get proper diagnosis of their mental health condition and didn't get a proper treatment. One of the conclusions I came to was that was because there were so many blind areas in mental health. 7 blind areas that I could find. The first blind area was that usually people didn't look for the cause. The doctors didn't look for the cause, and you need to know the cause. It's so much harder to help people get better if you don't know the cause, and if they get better and the cause is still there, they're going to relapse. You must know the cause. You must know why. And by the way, understanding is much more important than blaming. Some people are just looking for someone to blame. Oh, well, who is to blame? Well, what you usually find is that if a parent was not a good parent, and there were no perfect parents, no perfect mothers, no perfect fathers, no perfect families, so everybody had problems, but the parents who were not good parents usually were not good parents because they didn't have good parents, and that happened because their father was killed at the war, or their one family I remember with a couple of pretty wild kids, the mother had rheumatic heart disease and she could hardly walk. She just couldn't look after them properly because she had this rheumatic heart disease. So look for the cause, but don't do the blame game. The blame game just causes more problems. If people think you're going to blame them, they hide things from you, and then you don't know what the real cause is, and then you don't know exactly what to do. But causes are very important. Now, very often you can do nothing about the cause. The cause was something terrible that happened, and you can't change that, but you can change how you react to it. It's still in the family because it disturbed their chemistry and it disturbed their electricity. Everything that happens in us and everything we do is because of electrical messages from our brain that run along nerves. If I move this arm, it's because an electrical message has gone down to the muscles there. So everything that happens in us and everything that we do is the result of electrical and chemical messages, and you may not be able to change the fact. A friend who's a psychiatrist told me yesterday about a patient of his who had terrible mental health problems and went on and on and on, and they couldn't fix it. And then he found that this fellow had had an operation on his stomach to try to overcome obesity, and his wife didn't like meat, so they didn't eat very much meat, so he was terribly vitamin B12 deficient. And when they discovered that and gave him vitamin B12 injections, his mental health problems mostly went away. So look for causes. A blind spot. Another blind spot is that we treat people as if they are solo, but nobody's solo, and nearly all mental health problems are family mental health problems, and the person has to be treated as part of a family. And if you treat a person and the family stays the same, it's going to be very hard. They can go away to rehab and get better, but they come back to the family, and the problems just come back again. So it's a big blind area in mental health, that we treat people as if they're solo, and they're not. They're all part of families. And then we ignore the transgenerational trauma. We have these people that have got awful major depression or bipolar disorder or severe anxiety or whatnot, and it's because of terrible things that happened in their family, in that their perhaps in their generation, but we usually know about that, but often in their parents or their parents' parents or the parents' parents' parents, and we don't know about it, and that makes our management of that person's mental health much less efficient. And another terrible blind area in mental health is that we don't treat people as if most of their problems were habits, because most mental health problems are habits. Anxiety is a bad habit. Depression is a bad habit. What is a habit? A habit is something that happens over and over and over again until the electrical and chemical messages become so routine, they become so strong that that feeling or that way of thinking or that way of behavior becomes almost automatic. It's a habit. And we must treat people with mental health problems. We must teach them how to make and break habits, how to make good habits, how to break bad habits. How do you make good habits? Well, I recommend that you read Dr. James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. But briefly, to make a habit, you do it over and over and over and over again until the triggers and the electrical and chemical messages are strong and almost automatic, and then it's habit. And we have to do, so 60 to 65% of our life is habits, because our brain is so busy, got so much to do, that it can't treat everything consciously. It treats the really difficult things, it treats the new things, it treats the things that changes with conscious attention. But so much has to be turned into a habit that just happens by itself. We'd just be paralyzed if we couldn't do anything without our brain having conscious focus on that thing. Our brain has to consciously focus on a limited number of things, and nearly 2/3 of what we do, including sleep, is a habit. So, so how do you make habits? You do them over and over and over again until they're automatic and they're a habit. So the first thing to do that is you have to get very sure that you are going to be better off if you make this habit. Your life is going to be better if you make this habit. You have to think about that, talk to people about it. Yeah, it's going to be better. I'm going to do this because it's going to make my life better. So get very sure it's going to make your life better. And then make it convenient. I was telling a friend just recently, I got an exercise machine on my front veranda. It's about 3 meters from where I'm sitting. And I try to exercise every morning on it, but some mornings I miss. And if I told him, I wish I had one that was so nice and so compact that was right next to me here. I'd get on it and do 5 or 10 minutes several times a day. So if you want to make a habit, make it convenient. When I first started to do exercise, I had to drive 15 minutes to a health club, have special clothes, and after I'd done it, have a shower and then drive home again. As you can imagine, that didn't get done as often as it should have done. So to make a habit, make sure that you know it's going to make your life better, and make it convenient, and make it short and easy. Add the bells and whistles later, and just get the most important core of it into a habit, and then you can add refinements and make it enjoyable. And one of the things I discovered, I suppose this is a blind spot, I didn't have it on my list, but rewards are very important. Reward yourself for doing good things and for not doing bad things. When you do something good, congratulate yourself, smile and say, hey, good on you, that was good. And then do something that you'll enjoy as a reward. Play some music, look at some photos, or have a rest, but don't have a smoke and don't have an alcohol drink. The rewards must be benign. And this is my little reward machine. It's a pocket powder dispenser, and it's got vanilla powder in it, and when anytime, anywhere, I can whiz it out and drop a mil of lovely vanilla tasting powder on my tongue and give myself a little reward. And I've only got the initial trial ones, got 5,000 being made in Ningbo in China, and I hope that this little reward machine will help a lot of people to make habits and to break habits. How do you break habits? Well, what you're trying to do is to break the triggers and the electrical and the chemical messages. And just as repeating things over and over and over again makes those messages stronger and stronger and stronger till they're automatic and hard to stop, but some of them, which helped us to begin with, have become problematic and need to be stopped. And you break habits by delaying doing them, less, a smaller amount, and delaying them more and more, and doing them less and less, which weakens the electrical and chemical flows and triggers until you can start missing doing them. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, you got to go cold turkey, you just got to stop. Was it Ronald Reagan's wife said, just say no. Doesn't work mostly. If you can do it, fine, but there's often a lot of suffering involved, and after 2, 3 or 4 days you relapse back to it. Or you stop smoking for 3 months, and then in a social occasion or a sporting occasion or someone offers you a cigarette and you think, oh, I'll just have one, and bang, those electrical and chemical triggers come back straight away, because they were never properly weakened and broken. But if you delay a habit, say for instance with smoking, I've also got medicines in pocket powder medicine dispensers. These only give a very small amount of powder, so it's not enough for the taste. But if you've got the right medicine in your pocket, and every time you get the urge to smoke, you whiz it out, you drop a powder on your tongue, you suck it, you don't swallow it, and powder medicine on your tongue sucked starts to work in 5 minutes. So you can manage to put off smoking that cigarette for 15 minutes. You hang out a bit, you suffer a bit, but you've worked out that your life's going to be better if you stop smoking, if you break this habit. You see that you got that thing, you've talked about it, you thought about it, you know your life's going to be better, so you want to do it, but you don't want to do it, you want to have a smoke. But you then just delay the smoking a bit, and then you smoke, but you only smoke 3/4 of the cigarette and throw the last quarter away, and that weakens the electrical and chemical messages and triggers that underlying the smoking habit. And when it's weakened, you can put off the cigarette for 20 minutes or 25 minutes instead of 15 minutes. And you can smoke half the cigarette and then throw it away. And if you keep doing this weakening and delaying habit, you can usually cut your smoking by 1/4 every 1 to 3 weeks. So after a couple of weeks you're smoking 1/4 less. After 4 or 6 weeks you're smoking half as much. After 10 weeks you're only smoking 1/4 as much, and your chemistry and your messages have gone back to being much more normal. And then after 8, 10 or 12 weeks you can stop, and you carry the powder medicine in your pocket at all times. And when you're in a social situation or a sporting situation or a difficult situation and someone offers you a cigarette, you say, sorry, no, and you have a dose of your medicine instead. So, yeah, to break a habit, including mental health, bad habits, bad thoughts, bad feelings, bad behaviours, you first get very sure that you want to break the habit. You then make it inconvenient. Don't have your cigarettes in your pocket. Have them out the back somewhere where when you want to have a smoke, you've got to go and get one. You don't get the whole packet, you just get one. And every time you want to have a smoke, you've got to go out there and get it. So, inconvenient. Make it troublesome and unpleasant in some ways, like you have to wash your hands 3 times every time you have a smoke, or give yourself a reward for delaying and reducing the smoking. When just drop this lovely fruit powder taste on your tongue and focus on tasting the nice taste, and when it starts to wear off and you start to think about smoking again, have another taste. It's only costs you a few cents. A block of chocolate costs you $5, but you can get 50 tastes of vanilla for $5. So breaking habits is a very important part of mental health care, and it seems to be a blind spot. Another blind spot is that we don't find what people want and need to help correct a mental health problem. Really get them to think about what they want, what they need, that'll be better about not having that bad habit, about not worrying or not lying awake for hours asleep. Ask them what they want, what they need. Don't just give them a diagnosis. And when people are very clear about what they want and need, they've got a much better chance of getting it. Another weakness is we have to fix mental health problems early. If we get onto a problem as soon as it happens, it's usually fairly simple. The cause is fairly obvious. What's making it worse is fairly simple. And we've got a much better chance of fixing it fairly quickly. And because of stigma, a lot of people don't like to ask for help, and because of the cost and the difficulties, they often put it off, and 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, this problem's caused another problem, which is called another problem, which has caused another problem. They started with ADD, ADHD, and then they got anxiety and depression, and then they had employment difficulties, and then they had money difficulties, and then they had accommodation difficulties, and then they had bill collectors. So it's a terrible blind spot that we don't realize how important it is to get onto mental health problems as early as possible, fix them as early as possible. And then a very important one, blind spot, I think, is we don't realize how important that self-help is. If there's never going to be enough mental health workers to give all the people all the help that they need, and that's what I believe the situation is, and there's going to be long waiting lists, and people have to be taught to help themselves as much as possible. Now, some people can't help themselves. Their problems are too great and their mental health resources are too low. But some people can do most of it, and some people can do half of it, and some people can do a quarter of what needs to be done as self-help. So we must teach people, encourage self-help, and this is much more possible now with modern technology. My major project now is developing tools to help people to help themselves and to help themselves early. Mental health and addictions really only got two tools that have both got very big weaknesses. The first tool is medicines, and so many medicines are addictive because the person who needs the medicine wants the medicine to work quickly, get them better and stop taking the medicine. But the people who make them the medicines want them to take as much medicine as possible for as long as possible, preferably for the rest of their life. So they make a lot of medicines addictive. Virtually all the medicines for the commonest problem, which is worry, anxiety, are addictive. Originally all the barbiturates, and then all the benzodiazepines and Ambien, Silnox. Medicines addictive, and secondly they're too slow. You swallow a tablet or a capsule and it takes too long. It takes half an hour to an hour to go right down your gut and start to be absorbed into your bloodstream and start to help you, and it takes 1 to 2 hours to be fully effective. Just too slow. And the other tool is talk therapy, and talk therapy's got two problems. One is it's too slow, and the other is too expensive. When you see a new patient with a mental health illness, 2 or 3 of them, and a complicated family history, and some substance abuse or addiction, you need an hour. And that's too slow. And then you've got to see them every week for half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. It's just too slow. And it's too expensive. To be a therapist, you have to have at least a 4-year Bachelor of Psychology from a university. And a lot of therapists have got 6 or 7 year PhDs. And to be a psychiatrist takes 10 or 12 years. You've got to do a 6-year general medical degree, and then a couple of years of general medical practice, and then 3, 4 or 5 years of psychiatric practice. So those people are very intelligent. They've done very long, costly training courses during which they didn't earn much money. They need to be paid well. They deserve to be paid well. And if we don't pay them well, we'll have even less of them. So, talk therapy, too slow and too expensive. So I've developed a complete range of tools which I'm trying to get off the ground and spread. Videos under 100, nearly 100 under a minute videos on mental health and addiction, every aspect of mental health and addiction. 2 websites, mentalhealthvideos.com, mentalhealthvideos.com, and smilefixit.com. The first one was too long and people wanted a short one, so the Smile Fix It ones everything on one page, and you just tap the links to get the details. And then an app. The fastest way to understand what a person's mental health problems are and what caused them and so on is with an app. It used to take me half an hour, and it should have taken me an hour, but I didn't have an hour, so we'd rush through it, and we'd mostly get a reasonable grip on things in half an hour. But when I got so busy that I didn't have half an hour, then we made a checklist, a 20-question checklist, and one of my assistants would do the checklist with people, and then in 5 or 10 minutes with the result of the checklist I could come to grips with a person's problems much faster. But checklists mean that the troubled person still has to come to get any help, and it still takes another person, and they have to make appointments. And with an app, my app is called the Mental Fix-It app. The Mental Fix-It app. It's free. You can just whiz out your phone, tap the App Store button or the Google Play button, download the app in 10 seconds, and then it's got these questions, and each question's got 3 possible answers, and you pick the answer that's nearest right for you and tap on that. So you can go tap, tap, tap through all the questions that cover everything. When we first finished this app about a year ago, it would take people about 10 minutes to go right through it the first time. It got faster as they progressed, because some of the answers stopped asking because it didn't apply to them. They didn't have that problem. But that was too long. Just like 10-minute videos were too long and we had to make them 1 minute. A 10-minute app was too long. Was much better than the checklist. It was much better than just talking to people and making notes, but it was still too long. So then we learned what the most helpful questions were, reduced the number of questions, and people can now do the app in 5 minutes. So download it onto your phone in a few seconds, do the app in 5 minutes. The app tells you the 4 things you need to know. The first is which 6 of our under a minute videos are going to help most with the problems that you chose as being severe or moderate. And there's no faster, better, easier way to understand a problem, a mental health problem, than to watch a 1 minute video on it. And you can watch that 1 minute video as many times as you need to until you understand it, which is so much faster and better, more efficient, more effective than talk therapy. So videos, websites, the app, and then live streaming, which is what we're doing now, because a lot of people like to do live streaming. We do our live streaming on simultaneously on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Facebook and Instagram, and it's TikTok has got over 1 billion scrollers, over 1 billion people in the world do TikTok. So that's the one that I focus on most on. So live streaming, and I'm sorry that when we first started, sometimes we often got 2,000 to 4,000 viewers. Once I had 4,700 viewers in one session of 75 minutes. Once we had 8,600 viewers, another time we had 8,700 viewers. But because a lot of it's pretty repetitive, a lot of people have heard everything I've got to say. So yeah, so a lot of people heard what we were saying. So now we usually have between 1,000 and 2,000 viewers. So I can't talk to everyone, but after every session I go through all the new followers. We've got nearly 5,000 followers now. All the likes and all the comments. So I'm very interested in what you think. I want to know, I'm very interested in your comments, your questions and your criticisms. Please send them through the platform that you watch the live streaming through, or send them to me by email. The email is healthestuff@gmail.com, healthestuff@gmail.com, spelt how it's said, and you can look it up very quickly at smilefixit.com and send us an email, and I respond as much as I can to everybody who contacts me in that way, but I can't talk to you. Right, so yeah, so this live streaming I do on Wednesday, Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. Perth time, and that's 9 p.m. Sydney and Melbourne time, and unfortunately it's 7 a.m. New York time and 4 a.m. Los Angeles time, and we get a lot of people in the Northern Hemisphere following. Sometimes only 50% of our followers, of our viewers, are in Australia, and the majority of others are in Norway or Sweden or London or New York or somewhere. So I now do the Sunday session at 9 a.m. Perth time, 9 a.m. Perth time, which is the previous evening in the Northern Hemisphere, which is more user-friendly. So love to hear from you. Anyway, I think that's enough for today, so I'll just stop now. And today is Friday, so I'll be back again tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Perth time.